It was a bright Saturday morning when Daniel decided it was finally time to clean out his garage. The weather was perfect for it. Warm sunlight, a little breeze, and the sound of birds echoing through the quiet suburban street. His daughter Lily was leaving for college in a few months, and the garage was filled with old things they hadn't touched in years. Boxes of toys, books, bicycles, even a few small pieces of furniture that had gathered dust. Daniel wasn't just any neighbor on the street. Most people knew him as a quiet, polite man who waved when he saw them, kept his lawn trimmed, and minded his own business. What most of them didn't know was that Daniel was the detective chief at the city's police department. He had seen the best and worst sides of people through his job, so weekends were sacred for him, a chance to relax, enjoy normal life, and spend time with his family. That morning, he and Lily had set up a few folding tables on the driveway. They laid out books, tools, lamps, some old kitchenware, and a few framed photos. It looked cheerful, especially after Lily made small signs that said, "Garage sale, everything must go," in big, colorful letters. She taped one sign to a tree at the end of the driveway and another near the sidewalk. Daniel smiled as he looked at the setup. "You did a great job with those signs," he said, patting her shoulder. Lily grinned. "Thanks, Dad. I just hope someone actually comes. I'd rather sell this stuff than throw it away." "People always come for a good deal," he replied, sipping his coffee. "Just wait," and he was right. Within the hour, a few neighbors began to wander over. Families walking their dogs, parents pushing strollers, and even some teenagers looking for something quirky. Everyone seemed friendly, chatting with Lily, laughing about old movies or asking about prices. Daniel enjoyed watching people bargain. It reminded him of his childhood when his parents used to host yard sales too. It was such a simple, honest thing. Neighbors talking, trading, smiling. For him, this was peace. But peace never lasted too long in his neighborhood. Not with Karen around, everyone knew her. She was the self-appointed guardian of the HOA, the Homeowners Association. Karen didn't hold an official position, but you wouldn't know it from how she acted. She walked around the neighborhood like a patrol officer, snapping pictures of overgrown hedges, leaving notes on mailboxes about trash cans left out too long, and emailing the HOA board almost daily about rule violations. So, when Daniel saw a tall woman in oversized sunglasses striding toward his driveway, clutching a clipboard, he knew immediately that trouble was coming. Karen's sharp eyes scanned the setup as if she was inspecting a crime scene. "Good morning," Daniel greeted her politely, hoping to keep things friendly. Karen didn't smile back. "Morning," she said curtly. "What's going on here?" "It's just a small garage sale," Daniel replied, still calm. "Trying to get rid of some old things before my daughter heads to college." Karen tilted her head, unimpressed. "A garage sale? I don't remember seeing a notice about this." Daniel looked at her, slightly puzzled. "A notice? I posted one on the community board online last night." Karen huffed. "That's not what I mean. You need HOA approval for something like this. We can't have people cluttering up the street." Lily glanced at her dad, unsure what to say. Daniel gave her a small, reassuring smile before turning back to Karen. "I'm not sure about that rule. I looked over the HOA guidelines. It says we just need to make sure there's no loud music and we keep things tidy. I think we're fine." Karen tightened her lips. "Well, I've lived here for 15 years, and I've never seen anyone hold a garage sale without prior approval. It's against the spirit of the community. You can't just turn your house into a flea market." Daniel kept his voice level. "I promise it's just for today. We'll be done by noon." Karen crossed her arms. "That's not the point. These kinds of things bring strangers into the neighborhood. We can't have that." He looked around at the few visitors browsing the tables. 2 elderly neighbors from across the street, a couple walking their golden retriever, and a teenage boy looking through some comic books. "They don't seem like much of a threat," Daniel said quietly, a hint of humor in his tone. Karen's eyes narrowed. "Rules are rules. If everyone started doing what they wanted, this place would be chaos." Daniel nodded, knowing it was useless to argue. "I understand your concern, Karen, but I think we'll be fine. We're not breaking any rules." She looked offended. "Oh, I'll be checking on that. I'm calling the HOA president right now." She turned sharply and began tapping furiously on her phone. Lily leaned close to her dad and whispered, "She's serious, isn't she?" "Oh, she's very serious," he replied, chuckling softly. "Don't worry about it. Just keep smiling." A few minutes later, Karen returned, looking even more self-righteous. I just spoke to Tom, she said, referring to the HOA president. He wasn't aware of any sale. You should have gotten approval in writing. This is an unauthorized commercial activity. Daniel sighed. Karen, we're selling our own old stuff, not running a business. It's perfectly legal. She shook her head. We'll see about that. If you don't pack this up, I might have to call the authorities. That caught the attention of some neighbors nearby. A few whispered to each other, clearly uncomfortable. Others just rolled their eyes. They had seen Karen act like this before. Daniel, however, stayed calm. Years of police work had trained him to keep his cool even when someone pushed his buttons. He didn't like conflict, but he also didn't like being bullied. You can call whoever you like, he said kindly. We'll still be right here. Karen frowned. You think you can just ignore the rules? That's not how things work in this community. I'm not ignoring anything, Daniel replied. But I've read the HOA handbook. There's nothing that says I can't hold a garage sale. Karen looked unconvinced. Maybe not in your copy. That line made Lily laugh quietly under her breath. Karen shot her a glare. This isn't funny, young lady. Daniel put a gentle hand on his daughter's shoulder. It's okay, he said softly. Then turning back to Karen, he asked, Would you like to see the permit notice? I printed one just in case, Karen blinked. Permit? What permit? The city requires a simple online notice for garage sales. I filled it out last night and printed the confirmation. He pointed toward a sheet of paper taped to a table. Right there. Karen leaned in, squinting at the paper. Her eyes moved across the page, and her expression shifted. She clearly didn't expect him to have paperwork in order. Well, she said stiffly, that's not the HOA's permit. Daniel smiled.
No, but it's the city's, which matters more. Karen's lips pressed into a thin line.
She clearly didn't like losing an argument. I'll still be reporting this, she said, turning to leave. That's fine, Daniel replied easily. Have a great morning. Karen stormed off down the street, muttering to herself. Daniel shook his head, amused. He'd dealt with far tougher people in his career. Angry suspects, frustrated victims, high-pressure investigations. Compared to all that, this was just neighborhood drama. Lily looked at him half laughing, half anxious. Do you think she's actually going to call the police? She might, Daniel said, smiling faintly. She likes feeling in charge. And if she does? He shrugged. Then we'll say hello to some old friends. They both laughed, and the moment of tension melted away. More people came by as the morning went on. Kids played on the sidewalk. Someone's dog barked from a few houses down, and Daniel helped a neighbor load an old lamp into her car. It felt normal again, peaceful and pleasant. But every now and then, Daniel noticed Karen walking by on the opposite sidewalk, phone in hand, pretending to check messages but clearly watching. It was almost funny how seriously she took her role as neighborhood watchdog. He didn't mind. He'd seen her type many times before, people who needed control, who felt powerful when they could enforce a rule. Sometimes it came from loneliness, sometimes from pride. Either way, he wasn't about to let it ruin his morning. By mid-morning, most of the big items were gone. The old coffee table, the bicycle, and even Lily's box of comic books had found new homes. Daniel was just beginning to relax when he saw Karen again, this time walking fast, a determined look on her face. Here we go again, he thought. She stopped at the end of the driveway. I just got off the phone with the HOA president again, she said loudly, making sure everyone nearby could hear. And he agrees that this sale violates community standards. I warned you, but you chose to ignore me. Daniel put down the box he was carrying. Karen, I told you before, we're not violating anything. I've already reported it, she announced triumphantly. The police are on their way. Lily looked at her father nervously. Dad, she actually called? Daniel gave her a calm smile. That's all right, honey. Let's keep helping people. Karen crossed her arms, waiting proudly near the sidewalk like a sheriff waiting for backup. You'll see, she said smugly. Rules are rules. Inside, Daniel almost laughed. It wasn't the first time someone had threatened to call the police on him, but it was definitely the most ironic. He decided not to say anything. No point in embarrassing her now. He'd let the situation unfold naturally. The next half hour felt longer than it should have. A few neighbors stayed just to see what would happen. People whispered quietly, throwing glances toward Karen, who stood off to the side pretending to check her watch. Daniel continued talking to visitors, staying friendly and calm, while Lily handed out cold drinks to the neighbors. He could feel a strange tension in the air. a mix of amusement and anticipation. Everyone was waiting for the moment Karen's authorities would show up. Finally, in the distance, they heard the sound of an approaching car. Not loud, but familiar, steady, slow, professional. A police cruiser turned the corner and rolled down the street. Karen straightened immediately, her face lighting up. "Finally," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. She waved her hand dramatically as if signaling the car where to stop. "Right here, officers! Over here!" Daniel kept a straight face, though inside he was fighting the urge to smile. He recognized the car instantly. He even knew the officers, two of his own patrolmen likely responding to a neighborhood dispute call. As the cruiser slowed to a stop, the officers stepped out. They were both young, in uniform, looking around to assess the situation. Karen rushed over to them, gesturing toward Daniel's driveway like she was presenting evidence. "Officers," she began, "thank you for coming so quickly. I called because this man is hosting an unauthorized commercial event. It's against our HOA regulations and disturbing the peace." The officers exchanged a look, clearly unsure why they were there. One of them nodded politely, trying to keep a straight face. "All right, ma'am. We'll take a look." Karen folded her arms, satisfied. "Good. Maybe now he'll understand that rules exist for a reason." As the officers began to walk toward the driveway, Daniel stayed where he was, quietly arranging some books on the table. He looked up, caught their eyes, and gave them a small, knowing nod. The taller officer's face broke into a grin the second he recognized him. "Chief Reynolds?" he said, surprised. "What are you doing here, sir?" Karen froze. The shorter officer laughed under his breath. "Oh boy," he muttered. Daniel smiled politely. "Morning, officers. Just enjoying a little weekend cleanup." Karen turned toward him slowly, her eyes wide, color draining from her face. "Good, Chief?" she stammered. You're a police chief?" Daniel nodded. "Detective chief, actually. But today I'm just a guy trying to sell some old furniture." The officers chuckled. Karen, however, looked completely thrown off. I didn't know. I was just trying to keep the neighborhood safe." Daniel smiled kindly. "I appreciate that, Karen. It's good to care about the community. But I think we're all okay here." She tried to recover her composure, adjusting her sunglasses and muttering, "Of course I didn't mean to cause trouble." One of the officers grinned at her. "Ma'am, garage sales are perfectly legal as long as they're registered with the city, and it looks like the chief's got that covered." Karen didn't respond. She just nodded stiffly, turned around and walked away without another word. The officers chatted briefly with Daniel, laughed about the misunderstanding, and then left. As the cruiser pulled away, Daniel could feel everyone around him relax. The tension vanished, replaced with quiet laughter and relief. He turned to Lily, who was trying hard not to laugh. "Well," she said, "that was something." Daniel nodded, smiling. "You could say that." He looked down the street where Karen had disappeared. He didn't feel angry or smug, just a little sorry for her. Some people, he thought, live their whole lives needing to control everything. Maybe this would be a good lesson for her. For now, though, he was just glad the day could go back to being peaceful again. He picked up a book from the table, brushed some dust off it, and said, "All right, let's get back to business. Who wants to make a deal?" Lily laughed, and soon, the garage sale carried on as if nothing had happened. The neighbors smiled a little wider that day, and though no one said it out loud, everyone knew this story would be remembered for a long time. The neighborhood seemed unusually quiet after that small scene. The police cruiser had already turned the corner. The murmurs had faded, and everyone who had stayed to watch slowly went back to their homes, smiling and shaking their heads. A few neighbors came over to pat Daniel on the shoulder, laughing quietly about the whole thing. Only Karen could manage to call the police on a garage sale, one man said jokingly. Daniel chuckled. "Well, I guess she wanted to make sure we were operating legally." They all laughed, and for a moment it felt like a little community again. People talking, joking, and relaxing in the sun. Lily was still giggling about it as she packed a few more small boxes. "Dad," she said, "you didn't even tell them who you were until the last second." "I didn't see the point," he replied. She needed to see it play out for herself. "That was kinda perfect," Lily said. "The look on her face, I'll never forget that." Daniel smiled but didn't respond right away. He didn't like embarrassing people, even someone like Karen. He knew she meant well in her own way, even if it came out as arrogance. Still, part of him hoped she'd think twice before trying to control everyone around her. The rest of the afternoon went smoothly. A few more people stopped by to buy things, and by noon, most of the items were gone. Daniel packed up what was left in a few boxes and moved them to the garage. Lily counted the money, smiling proudly. "Almost $400, she said. "Not bad, right?" "Not bad at all," Daniel agreed. "That'll help with your move to college." She hugged him tightly. "Thanks for doing this with me, Dad. I know you're busy." "Hey," he said, smiling warmly. "You're my kid. I'll always make time." They spent the next hour cleaning up, stacking tables, folding chairs, and sweeping the driveway. Everything was calm again. No drama, no interruptions. But Daniel couldn't help noticing the faint feeling that Karen wasn't done yet. He'd seen that look in her eyes before she left, the look of someone who didn't like being wrong. By late afternoon, the sun started dipping lower, painting the houses gold. Lily went inside to shower and rest, while Daniel stayed outside to lock up the garage. He stood for a moment looking down the street and saw Karen's house 2 blocks away. The curtains in her front window shifted slightly. He smiled to himself. She was definitely watching. He shook his head, went inside, and tried to forget about it. The next morning, Daniel woke up early out of habit. Years in law enforcement had trained him to wake before sunrise. He made coffee and opened the window blinds. The air was cool and the neighborhood was quiet again. It looked peaceful, but experience had taught him that sometimes quiet was just the space between 2 small storms. He didn't have to wait long to find out. Around 9 a.m., he went out to check the mail. A small white envelope was sticking out of his box. It wasn't a letter from a friend or family. It was from the Homeowners Association. The words HOA Notice of Violation were printed in bold letters across the top. Daniel smiled softly. "Of course," he muttered, tearing it open. Inside, the letter was neatly typed. It said that his unauthorized public sale had violated community guidelines and that future activities of this kind must be approved by the HOA board. It also included a warning notice that would be kept on record. He laughed under his breath, shaking his head. "She really went through with it," he said. Lily walked out a few minutes later holding a piece of toast. "What's funny?" "Nothing," Daniel said, showing her the letter. "Just a reminder that some people have too much free time." Lily read it and rolled her eyes. "She sent you a warning? For what, selling my old books? I guess we're dangerous citizens now," he joked. "Are you going to do anything about it?" she asked. "I'll talk to the HOA president later," he said calmly. No need to make it a big deal, but it didn't take long for it to become one. Later that day, when Daniel went outside to water the lawn, he saw Karen walking her small dog. She saw him too and immediately straightened up, her posture confident again. She walked right over, pretending to smile. "Good morning," she said, her tone unusually polite. "Morning," Daniel replied evenly. "I see you got the notice," she said, gesturing toward his mailbox. "I just wanted to make sure you understood that it's nothing personal. Rules are important for everyone." Daniel nodded slowly. "I got it. Thanks for letting me know." Karen seemed pleased by his calm reaction. "We just have to maintain order around here. People notice when others don't follow procedures." "Of course," Daniel said, still polite. "I'm sure you understand," she continued, her voice dripping with self-satisfaction. "After all, in your line of work, you must believe in enforcing the rules." Daniel looked at her quietly for a moment. "Yes," he said, "but I also believe in using judgment before enforcing them." Her fake smile faltered for a second. She wasn't expecting that. "Well," she said after a pause, "I suppose that's one way to look at it." She tugged at her dog's leash and walked away, clearly unsettled. Daniel watched her go, shaking his head. He didn't dislike her. He just couldn't understand why some people made life harder for themselves and everyone else. That evening, after dinner, Daniel got a call from Tom, the HOA president. Tom was an easygoing man in his 50s who'd always tried to keep the peace in the neighborhood. He sounded apologetic. "Hey, Daniel," he began. "I just wanted to call and clear the air. I got Karen's complaint and the board had to send that notice because technically it was filed." Daniel smiled. "No worries, Tom, I figured as much." "Honestly, between you and me," Tom continued, "most of us thought it was ridiculous. It's not like you threw a party or caused a mess. Karen just, well, she's a little too eager sometimes." Daniel laughed quietly. "I've noticed." "I'll make sure it doesn't go on your record," Tom said. "We'll call it a misunderstanding." "Thanks, Tom, I appreciate it." After the call, Daniel felt better. The situation was basically over, at least officially. But he knew that for people like Karen, officially over didn't mean personally over. The next few days passed uneventfully. Daniel went back to work, handling investigations and meetings, while Lily started preparing for her college orientation. The house was busy but peaceful again. Karen, however, seemed to be watching more than usual. Every time Daniel's car left the driveway, he'd catch her glancing from her window. Every time he came home, her curtains would shift just a bit. It didn't bother him much, but he couldn't help noticing it. People like her didn't just stop once they'd decided they were protecting something. She wanted control, and when she couldn't have it, she got restless. One Thursday afternoon, Daniel came home early to surprise Lily with her favorite takeout. As he pulled into the driveway, he saw Karen standing across the street, talking to another neighbor, a new couple who had recently moved in. She was pointing toward Daniel's house and shaking her head disapprovingly. He sighed. He didn't need to hear the words to know what she was saying. Probably something about community standards or keeping the neighborhood in line. He wasn't angry, but he did feel a little sorry for her. What kind of life must it be? Spending every day looking for something to complain about. That weekend, the neighborhood hosted a small block party. It wasn't anything formal. Just a few families grilling, some kids playing with water balloons, and a table with snacks and lemonade. Daniel went mostly because Lily wanted to hang out with her friends before she left for school. He stayed on the edge of the crowd, chatting casually with Tom and a few others. Karen was there too, of course. She hovered near the food table, talking loudly about HOA rules and property values. Most people politely nodded while trying to change the subject. But Daniel noticed something interesting. Some of the neighbors who used to avoid confronting her were now rolling their eyes openly. The garage sale incident had clearly spread through the neighborhood. At one point, Karen walked over to Daniel, trying to sound friendly. "Nice turnout, huh?" she said. "Yeah," Daniel replied. "Good to see everyone relaxing for once." Karen laughed awkwardly. "I'm glad the HOA allowed it. We don't want chaos, you know." Daniel smiled faintly. "You're right. A little fun never hurt anyone, though." She didn't reply. She just nodded, looked around nervously, and moved away. As the evening went on, Daniel found himself sitting by the fire pit with a few neighbors. Someone brought up the garage sale story and the group laughed, telling it like it was local legend. Daniel didn't add much. He didn't want to embarrass Karen further. But it was clear the event had become part of the neighborhood's small history. Later that night, as the crowd thinned and people started cleaning up, Karen approached again. Her voice was lower this time, almost hesitant. "Listen," she said softly, "about what happened last weekend. I hope there are no hard feelings." Daniel looked at her. She was clearly trying to sound casual, but her tone was uneasy. "No hard feelings," he said simply. "It's behind us," she nodded quickly. "Good. I was just doing what I thought was right." "I understand," he said. "We all try to do that, don't we?" She gave a small smile. "Yes, I suppose we do." Then without another word, she walked away. It was the first time she hadn't sounded like she was giving orders. Maybe, Daniel thought, she had learned something after all. A few weeks passed. Lily left for college and the house felt a little quieter. Daniel missed her, but he was proud. He spent more evenings walking around the neighborhood, talking to neighbors and enjoying the peace. To his surprise, Karen seemed calmer these days. She still walked her dog every morning, but she stopped glaring at people's lawns or snapping pictures. Sometimes she even waved at him. Maybe it was guilt, or maybe she had finally realized that being part of a community meant more than enforcing rules. It meant kindness. One Saturday morning, Daniel was in his garage again, fixing an old shelf, when he heard a familiar voice outside. Karen was talking to someone. He peeked through the open garage door and saw her helping another neighbor set up a small table of handmade crafts. She was giving advice, but her tone was softer, almost friendly. A few days later, an email went out to the neighborhood mailing list. It was from the HOA board announcing something new, a community yard sale day open to everyone once a month. It was written in cheerful language with encouragement for residents to participate. At the bottom of the email it said, "Organized by Karen Miller." Daniel laughed out loud when he read it. The irony was too good to ignore. Later that afternoon, Karen walked by his house again. This time, she smiled genuinely. "We're doing a community sale next weekend," she said. "Thought it might bring everyone together." "I think that's a great idea," Daniel replied warmly. "Let me know if you need help." She hesitated for a second, then said, "Actually, I was wondering if you'd help me with the city permit part." "You seem to know how that works," Daniel grinned. "Sure, I can do that." For the first time, Karen seemed relaxed, less like an enforcer and more like a neighbor. Maybe, in some odd way, that first garage sale had started something good after all. The following weekend, when the community sale took place, the street was full of laughter, tables, and chatter. Kids ran around, neighbors swapped stories, and Daniel watched from his driveway with a quiet smile. Karen moved from house to house, organizing, chatting, even laughing with people. It was the first time Daniel had ever seen her look genuinely happy. As the sun set, she walked over and thanked him. "You know," she said, "I think this turned out pretty well." "It did," he agreed. "See what happens when you loosen up a little?" She laughed, shaking her head. "Maybe you're right," Daniel smiled. Better late than never. That night, after everything was cleaned up, he sat on his porch with a cup of coffee. The neighborhood was peaceful again, and for once, it felt like everyone was truly part of the same community. He thought about the whole experience, the arguments, the laughter, the misunderstanding, and the unlikely friendship that came from it. It reminded him of something he'd learned long ago in his job. Sometimes, people just need a little understanding to change. He took a slow sip of his coffee, smiled to himself, and whispered, "Not a bad ending after all." The first community yard sale turned out better than anyone expected. The entire street was filled with laughter, tables full of trinkets and the smell of fresh coffee and baked cookies. It wasn't just about selling things anymore. It was about neighbors actually talking to each other again. People who used to just wave in passing now stood together, swapping stories, sharing memories, and smiling like old friends. Daniel couldn't help but feel proud as he looked around. The same idea that had caused so much trouble before had now become something that brought everyone closer. It was funny how life worked like that, how a small misunderstanding could turn into something meaningful if you just gave it time and patience. Karen was everywhere that day. She moved from table to table, checking on people, helping older neighbors set up their displays, and making sure there was enough space for everyone. Her clipboard was still in her hand, but this time, she wasn't using it to write complaints. She was keeping track of who needed tables, who needed signs, and which houses still had items left to sell. For once, her energy was being used in a good way. When she walked past Daniel's house, she stopped for a moment. "You know," she said with a small smile, "I didn't expect so many people to come." "I told you people love a good sale," Daniel replied with an amused grin. She nodded, almost shyly. "You were right. I guess I was too strict before." Daniel smiled. "You were trying to protect the neighborhood. Nothing wrong with caring. It's just about how you show it." Karen looked thoughtful. "Maybe I should have learned that sooner." He laughed softly. "Better late than never." She gave a small smile and walked off to help someone else. Daniel watched her go, still amazed at how much had changed in just a few weeks. The same woman who once threatened to call the police was now organizing something that made everyone happy. As the morning went on, Daniel's driveway filled with visitors again. Some people came just to talk. Others wanted to thank him for handling the earlier incident so calmly. A few older neighbors told him that it reminded them of the old days, when communities used to look out for each other instead of arguing over rules. Hearing that made Daniel smile. By noon, the street looked like a festival. Kids rode their bikes between the tables. Someone played a guitar and people laughed over cups of lemonade. Even the dogs seemed happier, wagging their tails as they wandered around. It felt like the neighborhood had finally come alive. Daniel saw Karen chatting with Tom, the HOA president, near the middle of the street. They were both smiling, and Tom gave her a friendly pat on the shoulder. That simple gesture said a lot. For the first time, Karen wasn't seen as a problem. She was part of the solution. When the day finally wound down and the last of the tables were folded, people lingered in the street, not wanting the day to end. Someone suggested doing it again in a few months, and almost everyone agreed. It wasn't just about the sales, it was about the feeling, a sense of connection they hadn't felt in years. As the crowd thinned, Karen walked up to Daniel again, her face glowing from the sun and excitement. "Thank you," she said sincerely. "I don't think this would have happened if you hadn't handled things the way you did." Daniel shook his head. "You're the one who made it happen. You just needed the chance," she smiled softly. "You're kind to say that, but I know I was difficult before. I'm trying to change. That's all anyone can do," he replied. "Just try." For the first time, Karen looked genuinely comfortable. She wasn't putting on an act or trying to prove anything. She was just herself, human, imperfect, but trying. And that, Daniel thought, was what made people worth understanding. That evening, after everyone went home, Daniel sat on his porch with a cup of tea. The street was quiet again, but it was a different kind of quiet now, warm and peaceful. The kind that comes after a good day. He could still hear faint laughter from down the road, and the air smelled faintly of barbecue and flowers. He thought about how much had changed in such a short time. A few months ago, the neighborhood had been polite but distant. Now people stopped to talk, shared recipes, helped each other with small things. Even Karen had softened. And it all started with a simple garage sale. It was funny, he thought. Sometimes the smallest things, an argument, a misunderstanding, even a complaint, could become the spark that made people see each other differently. A few days later, Daniel received a handwritten note in his mailbox. It wasn't from the HOA this time. The envelope was pink with neat cursive writing. Inside, a short message read, "Thank you for your patience and kindness. I've learned more from that day than I ever expected." Daniel smiled when he read it. He tucked the note inside a drawer in his study. Not because he needed to remember it, but because it reminded him that people can change if given the right reason. Life settled into a calm rhythm after that. Daniel went back to work at the station handling his usual cases. But every now and then, when he drove through his neighborhood, he noticed little differences. Neighbors waved more often. Kids played outside together. The air just felt lighter. One morning, as he was heading to work, he saw Karen standing in front of her house, helping an older couple carry some groceries. She caught his eye and waved. He waved back, smiling to himself. Weeks passed, and the next community yard sale came around. It was even bigger than the first. This time, Karen had put up bright banners and someone had organized music. A local bakery even donated some pastries. It was lively and cheerful, exactly what a community event should be. Daniel walked around, talking with everyone, enjoying the laughter and easy atmosphere. A few people joked about how the chief had started the whole tradition, but he just laughed it off. He didn't like being in the spotlight. He was just happy to see people happy. Midway through the event, Karen walked up to him again, this time holding a clipboard that was covered in colorful stickers. "Guess what?" she said proudly. "The HOA decided to make this an official event every season. Spring, summer, and fall." "That's great news," Daniel said with genuine joy. "You've done a great job," Karen laughed lightly. "It feels strange hearing that from you considering how we started." He smiled. "I'd say we both learned something." She nodded. "I learned that being in control isn't the same as helping. And maybe, I don't always need to be right." "That's a big lesson," he said. "Takes some people years to figure that out." Karen's smile softened. "Maybe it took a garage sale and a visit from the police for me." They both laughed. The sound of it was natural, easy, and genuine, something that would have been impossible just a short while ago. As the day went on, Daniel noticed something interesting. People naturally gravitated toward Karen now. They asked her for advice, not because they feared her, but because they respected her organization skills. It was as if she had become the neighborhood's trusted planner, not its self-appointed enforcer. It made Daniel happy. He liked seeing people grow. In his years as a detective, he had met all kinds, some who refused to change and others who surprised everyone by doing exactly that. Karen, he realized, belonged to the second group. Later that afternoon, as the sun began to set, Karen approached him again with a small paper cup of lemonade. "For you," she said. "Chief's special reward." He chuckled and accepted it. "Thank you." She looked at him curiously. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure. When I called the police that day, why didn't you tell me who you were sooner?" Daniel thought for a moment before answering. "Because it wouldn't have changed your mind. You were angry, and if I'd pulled rank, it would have just embarrassed you. I figured it was better to let things play out naturally." Karen looked at him surprised. "So you let me call the police knowing they'd recognize you?" He nodded. "Pretty much." She blinked, then laughed. I can't believe you did that, Daniel smiled. Sometimes the best lesson is the one people teach themselves. She stared at him for a long moment before saying softly, You're a good man, Daniel. He smiled faintly. I try. The next few weeks passed peacefully. The community yard sale became a regular thing, and Karen's attitude continued to change. She started volunteering at local events, helping at the nearby school, and even organizing a food drive around the holidays. People who used to avoid her now greeted her warmly. Daniel saw it all quietly, never taking credit. He didn't need recognition. For him, the reward was simply seeing harmony in the place he called home. One chilly evening in late autumn, he came home from work to find a small package on his doorstep. Inside was a framed photo, one taken during the last yard sale. It showed him, Karen, and several neighbors standing together, smiling in front of a row of colorful tables. A small note was taped to the back. To the man who taught me patience, thank you. He placed the photo on a shelf in his living room right next to a family picture. Every time he looked at it, it reminded him that small acts of understanding could change more than any argument ever could. Life moved on. The seasons changed. Lily came home for winter break and laughed when she saw the picture. So you and Karen are friends now? I wouldn't go that far, Daniel said with a grin. But we get along, she laughed. I still can't believe she called the police on you. Neither can I, he said. But in a strange way, I'm glad she did. She looked at him curiously. Why? Because it made this place better, he said. Sometimes people need to clash a little before they figure out how to connect. Lily smiled and leaned against his shoulder. You always find the good in everything, huh? He smiled softly. It's better than the alternative. That night, as Daniel sat by the window watching the quiet street, he felt content. The houses glowed softly under the streetlights, and a light breeze rustled the trees. He thought about everything that had happened, the arguments, the laughter, the lessons learned, and realized something simple but powerful. People make mistakes. They get stubborn, they say the wrong things, they push too hard, but most of them deep down just want to belong. They want to feel seen and heard. And sometimes all it takes is one person willing to listen calmly, to not fight back, to let the truth show itself naturally. That was what had happened here. One person's stubbornness had met another's patience, and somehow, it had turned into friendship and unity. It reminded him why he'd become a detective in the first place, not just to solve problems, but to understand people. The neighborhood was quiet now, but not cold or distant. It was the quiet of people resting after a good day, the kind that meant things were peaceful, stable, and okay. Daniel finished his tea, turned off the porch light, and smiled to himself. It was a small neighborhood, an ordinary place, but to him, it was proof that kindness could change anything. And as he closed the door behind him, he couldn't help but think that sometimes the best justice doesn't come from authority or power. It comes from patience, understanding, and a heart willing to see the good in others. The months after the second yard sale felt like a new chapter for everyone in the neighborhood. Winter came slowly that year, and the trees along the street shed their last golden leaves. The sidewalks were quiet again, but the warmth between neighbors remained. It was like the spirit of those sunny yard sale days still lingered, even as the air turned cold. Daniel often found himself smiling at small things now. The way neighbors greeted him with real warmth, the way children waved as he drove by in his old truck. Even Karen's emails from the HOA had changed, short, kind reminders instead of strict notices. Life had a calm rhythm to it, and for once everyone seemed content. But one cold morning in late January, that peace was tested again, though not in the way anyone expected. It started with a simple message in the neighborhood group chat. Someone posted that there had been break-ins in a nearby community. Just a few miles away, cars had been rummaged through at night and packages stolen off porches. No one in Daniel's area had been affected yet, but the talk quickly spread. Fear does that. It travels faster than truth. By evening, people were on edge. Someone said they saw a suspicious car parked near the park. Another mentioned hearing noises at night. Soon everyone was double-locking their doors and peeking out their windows. Karen, being who she was, took it upon herself to act. The next morning, she sent out a long message to everyone in the neighborhood. Due to recent events, we need to stay alert. I will personally organize a watch rotation for the week until we're sure everything is safe. Daniel read the message over breakfast and sighed softly. He understood her intentions. She wanted to protect people, but he could already tell where this was going. Fear mixed with control rarely led to calm results. Later that day, as he stepped outside to clear snow from his driveway, he saw Karen walking briskly up the street. Clipboard in hand, scarf flying in the cold wind, she spotted him and waved. "Morning, Chief," she said cheerfully. She had started calling him that after learning his job, though it was always half in jest. "Morning," Daniel replied, leaning on his shovel. "Organizing the troops already?" Karen smiled but looked serious. "I just want to make sure everyone feels safe. You've seen the news, right? Those break-ins weren't far from here." "I did," he said calmly, "but I wouldn't worry too much yet. Thieves usually target easy spots, places without cameras, dark alleys. We're a bit too visible for that." Karen nodded but didn't seem convinced. "Still, it doesn't hurt to be careful. I've already assigned volunteers for patrol shifts. We'll keep an eye out at night." Daniel gave her a patient look. "Just be sure people don't go overboard. Last thing we need is someone calling the cops because a delivery driver parked too long." She smiled faintly. "I'll make sure of that. But even with good intentions, things have a way of spiraling when fear gets involved." Within 2 days, Karen's neighborhood watch became the talk of the block. A few of the more eager residents started driving around at night, flashlights in hand, taking notes on cars they didn't recognize. Someone even put up a small sign near the entrance that said, "Neighborhood Watch in Effect." At first, Daniel thought it was harmless. A bit of overcaution, perhaps. But one evening, just as he was settling in to watch an old movie, his phone buzzed with a message from Karen. "Chief, can you come out for a moment? We might have a situation." He grabbed his coat and stepped outside. Down the street near the park, a few neighbors had gathered around a parked van. Karen was standing in front of it, arms crossed, looking both nervous and determined. Daniel approached slowly. "What's going on?" Karen turned to him. "This van has been parked here for over an hour. No one's come or gone. People are worried it's someone watching houses." Daniel looked at the van. It was an old white delivery van with faded lettering on the side. The engine was off and the windows were slightly fogged. He stepped closer, peering inside. After a moment, he knocked on the window. A startled man sat up from the driver's seat, blinking. He looked tired and confused. "Everything all right, sir?" Daniel asked gently. The man nodded quickly. "Yeah, sorry. I'm just resting. I deliver packages for a small business, long shift today. I stopped to take a quick break before heading back." Daniel could tell he was telling the truth. The man's uniform was wrinkled but clearly branded. There were boxes stacked neatly in the back. He turned to the group. "It's fine. He's just resting." Karen frowned, her voice uncertain. "Are you sure?" "We can't be too careful." "I'm sure," Daniel said firmly but kindly. "No harm done." Karen hesitated, then nodded slowly. The others began to drift away, some looking embarrassed. The driver thanked Daniel softly before driving off. When they were alone, Daniel turned to Karen. "You did the right thing calling me. But remember, people are scared right now. It's easy for that to turn into something worse if we're not careful." She sighed, rubbing her gloves together. "I know, I just don't want anyone to get hurt." "I understand," he said. "But sometimes protecting people means calming them down, not stirring them up." Karen nodded quietly, thinking about his words. "I'll remind everyone to stay level-headed." Over the next week, the watch continued, but things were calmer. Daniel could see Karen trying hard to handle it responsibly. She sent thoughtful updates, reminded people to report real issues only, and even dropped off hot coffee for those volunteering late at night. He admired that about her, how she took responsibility seriously even when she stumbled. There was a sincerity to her that people had started to notice. Then one morning, Karen knocked on Daniel's door again, this time looking worried. "I need your advice," she said. "Something strange happened last night." He invited her inside and she sat down at the kitchen table, fidgeting with her gloves. One of the neighbors, Linda, said she saw someone near her porch around midnight. She yelled and they ran off. Nothing was taken, but it scared her. Daniel listened carefully. "Did anyone get a look at them?" "No, just that it was dark and the person wore a hoodie. She didn't recognize them. Could have been a teenager or even someone walking home," Daniel said thoughtfully. "But it's worth checking the cameras." "I'll stop by later." Karen nodded. "Thank you. I just hate that people are on edge again. It feels like all the progress we made might slip away. Daniel smiled reassuringly. It won't. You've built trust here. A scare like this won't erase that. Later that afternoon, Daniel reviewed the footage from Linda's porch camera. Sure enough, he saw a figure walking near the porch around midnight. They paused briefly, then hurried away when a light flicked on. The footage was grainy, but Daniel could tell it wasn't a professional thief, more like a young person. The posture, the hesitation, it all pointed to nerves, not confidence. He called Karen over to show her. See this? Notice how they pause when the light comes on? A real thief would have been quicker. This looks like someone wandering. Maybe a teenager daring each other, maybe just lost. Karen studied the screen, frowning. So it's not what people think? No, but we should still be careful how we explain it. If we say it's nothing, people might not listen next time. If we say it's danger, they'll panic. The truth is somewhere in between. Karen nodded slowly. You're good at this, knowing how people think. Daniel chuckled softly. Comes with the job. People aren't bad, they're just scared sometimes. Fear makes them see shadows where there aren't any. Over the next few days, things settled again. Karen sent out a calm message explaining the situation, that someone had been seen but no damage was done, and extra patrols would continue just to be safe. She worded it perfectly, factual, gentle, and reassuring. Daniel was impressed. Then, on a quiet Saturday morning, something unexpected happened that brought everything full circle. Karen came to Daniel's door again, but this time, she wasn't carrying a clipboard. She held a tray with 2 cups of coffee and a small paper bag. Peace offering, she said with a smile. I thought we could sit outside for a bit. They sat on his porch, the winter sun shining weakly through the clouds. The steam from the coffee rose in soft curls between them. I was thinking, she began slowly. A year ago, I never would have imagined sitting here like this. You and I, well, we didn't start on the best terms, Daniel smiled. No, we didn't, she laughed softly. But I've learned something from all this. I used to think keeping control was the only way to keep things right. That if I didn't manage everything, it would fall apart. But watching how you handle people, it's different. You don't push, you just guide. He looked thoughtful. It's not always easy. But people rarely change because someone forces them to. They change because someone believes they can. Karen nodded slowly, her expression soft. You've done that for me, you know. You didn't make me feel small that day, even when you could have. You let me figure things out. Daniel smiled gently. Everyone deserves that chance. They sat quietly for a moment, sipping their coffee. The neighborhood was peaceful. Children laughing in the distance, a dog barking somewhere down the street. You know, Karen said after a pause, I think I finally understand what makes a real community. It's not about rules or meetings. It's about people who care, even when they don't agree. Daniel nodded. That's the heart of it. As the morning went on, more neighbors passed by and waved. Karen waved back, her face lighting up. She seemed different now, more relaxed, more herself. The woman who once tried to control everything had learned the beauty of letting go a little. Before she left, she handed Daniel a folded paper. This is the proposal for the next community project. I'd love your thoughts. He opened it later and smiled when he saw what it was. Karen wanted to start a community kindness day, a simple event where people could volunteer, help elderly neighbors, and donate to local shelters. It was exactly the kind of idea he'd expect from someone who had truly changed. Daniel approved it immediately. As winter turned to spring again, the neighborhood blossomed, not just in color, but in spirit. There were more friendly faces, more laughter, and more trust than ever before. Karen became known as the heart of the community, not its enforcer. And Daniel? He remained the quiet strength behind it all, guiding when needed, stepping back when things flowed naturally. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the street lights flickered on, Karen stopped by again. She looked around at the peaceful homes, the sound of distant chatter, and smiled. It's funny, she said softly. Everything feels right again. Like home should, Daniel nodded. It does, she turned to him. Thank you for not giving up on me. Or this place. He smiled warmly. You did the hard part. You changed, she laughed lightly. Maybe. But sometimes change just needs the right example. They stood there for a moment, watching the lights shimmer on the quiet street. It was the same neighborhood that once felt divided, yet now it felt like a family.